I'm the International Affairs Manager at NK Watch. I participate in a lot of the research we do, interviewing victims, research on detention facilities, and international advocacy as well. Okay, so today we're going to talk about several different cases from NK Watch's research. These are based on the real witness testimonies, but I've had to obviously change the details to protect the victims. Our third case is about absenteeism. It's about a 21-year-old girl who just didn't go to work. Right in North Korea, individuals have state-mandated jobs that they are supposed to do, unless they are, for example, married and do the role of housewife. Right, in that case, they probably will not have a state-mandated job. And in this case, this victim didn't report to her job for several weeks or a couple of months, and this landed her in trouble. Now, she had a hard time living through the Artist March, which is the famine in the 90s. So what she had to do was sell food at the market, or the Changmadang is the term they use, in Haesan City. We're still in Haesan here, to support her family, instead of going to her state-mandated job. Specifically, this victim reported that her father was ill, so her father wasn't able to go out and work or go to his state-mandated job either. So the only way their family could survive was if her and her mother, right, worked together to sort of provide. Now, she was detained at the Haesan City People's Security Agency, which we just talked about, for 2 weeks, and she was sentenced to 3 months of disciplinary labor for her absenteeism, right? And this is also a law. It's Article 115 of the North Korean Administrative Punishment Act. This is something we also see a lot of when we do our interviews. A lot of cases of people reporting that they didn't go to work, so they had to do this sort of disciplinary labor. In fact, I actually interviewed someone yesterday that was a similar case to this one. According to the testimony of victim 3, the People's Security Agency was terrible, right? This was where she was taken at first when she was arrested. I had to sit cross-legged and maintain a fixed posture all day. I was interrogated every day and had to write confessions repeatedly. This is another really common thing we see among our victims we interview, is they have to write these confessions, right? Or they sometimes call them self-criticisms. What they do is they make you write it again and again and again, and they want to see if you change anything, right? That's kind of their method of seeing who's lying when they're writing their confessions. She continues. It was so overcrowded, we had to sleep pressed up against each other. The cell was infested with lice and insects, but we didn't have any water to bathe. As we can see, the sort of sanitation in a lot of these facilities is rather similar. We see repeated reports of people's cells in these facilities being infested with all kinds of things like lice, insects, right, bed bugs, cockroaches, sometimes rats and whatnot. And that's another big issue that can lead to a lot of sicknesses among these victims. And we get a lot of reports of people saying that they were sick. That they caught something. She continues. Disciplinary labor center. I had to work carrying firewood every day. So we see here, right, this is a case where she is carrying firewood. Probably in most cases, this is on a mountain, right? So she's probably going up to the top of the mountain where the logging is happening and carrying the wood down to the camp. She continues. In the evening, everyone had to receive ideological education until we went to sleep. The guards liked me because I worked well and didn't cause any problems. But the other prisoners were beaten often. They always swore at me because they thought I got special treatment. Fortunately, I got out early. I was scared to go back, so I was never absent from my state job again until I left for China. Our fourth case is about a 48-year-old man who was imprisoned for having contact with South Korea, or allegedly having contact with South Korea. This man used a Chinese cell phone. He had a Chinese cell phone that he used to keep in touch with acquaintances in China and in South Korea, right? He knew several people that had defected, that had gone to China, maybe were living and working there, or had come all the way to South Korea and were living and working here. This man's problem started when one person he knew was caught trying to defect, and they named him as a defector broker. Right now, for those of you that might not be aware, when people are defecting, normally they don't just run to the border and swim across the river. They pay someone to take them to China, or they pay a broker. We call them brokers to take them to China. Now, why this man or this person named the victim as a defector broker is not apparent. Now, when this happened, the agents didn't come to his house and handcuff him per se. They invited him to the North Pyongan Provincial State Security Agency to confirm the identity of the suspect, the person he knew. Now, he denied knowing this person, but in reality, if he hadn't have gone, they would have arrested him and it would have been a bigger issue, right? But this is how they can sort of maintain some sort of a plausible deniability, right? He wasn't arrested, he was invited. In this process, he ended up arbitrarily detained for 8 months at 3 different facilities. All right. According to the testimony of the victim 4, I was beaten for 14 days in a row at the North Pyongan Provincial State Security Agency. The agents kicked me while I was tied up on my knees. They broke my arm, and I still have to go to the hospital because it was never treated correctly. They were trying to force me to confess to helping people defect, but I knew that I would be sent to a political prison camp if I did, right? So like I said, those sort of more serious crimes related to national security, in this case, aiding defectors, will land you in a political prison camp. And most people in North Korea do know this. It was hard to work at the disciplinary labor center with one arm, but I managed. The worst part was the smell. The facility didn't have any plumbing, so everyone just used a plastic bucket. It was always overflowing and smelled terrible. Right? Again, we see this sort of issue with the sanitation, where people are likely to get sick because these facilities are so dirty and not kept clean. One thing I didn't mention is a lot of these detention facilities, specifically the cells, they're not going to have things like running water or electricity, right? Sometimes they won't even have things like blankets in the wintertime. They're very, very bare bones, and people are often kept in them in large groups. So they're basically a breeding ground for all sorts of diseases and infestations. It's very, very difficult for these people to be in here. I'm not going to talk about a specific case here. I'm just going to talk about enforced disappearance in general, and the political prison camps for our last case. This is something we focus on, considering that our organization was founded by the victims of the political prison camps, and our executive director used to work in one. So this is something that we like to talk about a lot. We interview people normally in South Korea that have lost contact with their family members in North Korea. We will interview someone here and write a petition on behalf of their family members. And then we will send it to the working group on enforced or involuntary disappearance under the UN. These petitions that we write are actually forwarded to North Korea in this case. These other cases of torture we're documenting, we don't want those individuals' data to be leaked because those cases aren't actually sent to North Korea. We don't want any repercussions to happen to their family if North Korea finds out that they are telling their stories in South Korea. In this case, they are actually contacted with this specific information, so it's a little different. We contact them, and normally when someone is disappeared, we know that they're going to have been sent to a political prison camp. This is often because of guilt by association, or in the Korean word they use is 연좌제. This happens very often if, for example, a family member or someone they know defects to South Korea, then they may be sent to a political prison camp. They may be punished for that person's defection, basically. Now, when people are disappeared in this way, they're never found. This is because anyone sent to a political prison camp these days now serves a life sentence, and the North Koreans will deny that they are in detention or just ignore the inquiry altogether. More recently, North Korea has stopped answering these inquiries altogether. In the past year and a half, the past couple quarters, when we have submitted these these cases. We have not received any responses from North Korea, or the UN has not received any responses from North Korea. Normally, if the UN receives the response, they will forward it to us so we can share it with the family. The political prison camps. These are called the Kwanliso, a little different from the Kyohwaseong. Now, these are village-style camps. They're very, very large. They're in remote places deep in the mountains that are very hard to get to and very hard to get out of. There used to be two types of these facilities. There were total control zones, which still exist today. There were also revolutionary zones. Revolutionary zones were facilities that actually did have a fixed term sentence, right? Maybe 10 years, 15 years. They were extremely long sentences, but they did have an end. And they were all abolished in 2012. Now, our organization has a unique insight to this because our executive director was a guard at the total control zone, right? Civilians are not permitted access here. Prisoners serve life sentences. Guards are ordered to kill prisoners that try to escape, right? Our executive director, his orders when he was working here was if he saw anyone trying to leave these villages, you hop a fence or walk down a road, he was ordered to shoot them on sight. In this case, because of the guilt by association nature of the detention, a lot of times entire families will be detained here and forced to work. There are people who will grow up here and live their whole lives in these camps. In some cases, right, if you have, let's say there's a married couple at one of these facilities, they may be rewarded by being allowed to spend a night together if they're doing something well, right, or the guards are pleased with them. And in this case, sometimes the wife will have a child. The child will grow up here. There will be some sort of school or education, but the child will never be allowed to leave this camp. As of 2013, in the UN report, it was estimated that there were 80,000 to 120,000 prisoners being held in these facilities. Our executive director thinks it's somewhat less now based on what he sees, his monitoring of these facilities, probably closer to maybe a little over 50,000 or so.